All right, hello everyone. My name is Timothy Lee Grant, and today we are continuing to learn all of those important skills which are found in backend software engineering. That's our goal. We're trying to become a backend software engineer, so learning all of those skills. So today what we're going to be doing is investigating how to use MongoDB. So we got something working on our project. What the idea was is get a golden unit, something that actually works, that can communicate to a database. Now it's time to actually do the work and figure out, okay, well, what's going on? How do you communicate to a database? How do you get data? How do you put data in? How do you get data back? So that's this video, is we're going to start trying to play around with this MongoDB, see what we can do, and see how it's actually working. How does MongoDB integrate into a backend server, which is what we have. So let's play around with it and see what is up. All right, so let's just talk through kind of what's... Is this still running actually? Oh, yes, I guess it was. So let's kind of go through what we have so far. We have this server.js. Now, what is this? This is going to be the entry point into our program, right? We run this, and this is kind of what listens. It's going to be continuously right here listening over where is it? Yeah, listen. It's going to be continually listening for routes which go to that IP address and port. So once it gets a route or a route, it's going to process it. So we have something here which is called MongoDB test, okay? And now what you're able to do is, okay, if you get a route, Express right here, this is Express, will send back an EJS. Now what is EJS? It is essentially just HTML. So it sends back an HTML. And we created this HTML called MongoDB test EJS, okay? So what is that? That's this right here. It is the... So it is a... okay. So we have a lot of strange stuff here that I forgot to delete. Let's just delete it right now. How does that sound? There we go. All gone. So it is a HTML right here, and we have a text input, okay? And then we have this button, and when you press submit data, it will take in the text which is on the screen and perform this fetch operation. And this fetch operation sends data to another endpoint on our server. Okay, so let me node mon server .js. Let's just run this and I can show you. Let's go to that endpoint. So we have here MongoDB test. Okay, so I run that here. All right, so we came here, we went to this endpoint, and now it's rendering this EJS right here. Okay, and just as I said, we have an input field and we have a submit button. Okay, that's these two, and when I click the submit data button, it will call this function, okay, and do this operation. So what does it do? It just grabs the data which is inside the input data, which is this text box. It will then perform a fetch operation, which will send a post request to this endpoint. Now, I'll show you where that endpoint is and what's going on there a little bit later. But then we will send the body, which is username. So username here it's going to say username and then the actual data. So whatever this value is. Okay. Meaning I'm going to type something. Value, or it's just my name. Timothy. Okay. So now I do submit here, and we should be able to get that. So yep, we're able to get that data. Okay. And it performed a fetch operation. I keep saying that, but what's going on? So let's go to this endpoint here and actually look at it. So that is going to be back here. So we come here and it goes to users first and then user routes. Okay. And then submit Mongo, right? Yes. User routes, submit Mongo. Okay, so now the fetch request comes here and it's a post. So it's going to hit this route. Okay, so it's at this endpoint and it's a post request. So here's how we're going to handle it. All right. So we have access here, this request, we have access to the body. So in the request, this is the web page which makes the request. And this web page is going to have some data available to it. And what data was actually available? Well, we had one of the items that we sent was this body, right? So within that, I'm able to get the body. Okay, cool. So I got the body, and then this is where you actually see the Timothy right there, was I tried to experiment and say, hey, can I just access elements within the body? And so I did new user and then username, which notice username here matches up exactly with username. So it's that camel case, I think, right? So those two, this is the field within the JSON object within the body section, right? And I was able to access its value, which turns out to be Timothy. That's what the user put in to the web page and was sent over in the fetch request. All right, so we haven't done much with awaits, and so I'm not sure exactly what this does or how it works. I would guess it's something about like threading, that it spins up a new thread and does this operation, but allows execution to continue on going down here while this statement is still processing. I'm guessing that's what's happening. We can go and investigate it a little bit more, but that's not really the point of this video right now. The video is trying to figure out how to get the database. So this seems to be the part that we really care about. So new user save. Okay. So this is, okay, here, this user is from where? User is here. Okay, so we're grabbing this models user. So go up one. I think it's this one just right there, but go up one here. Okay, and then go into models, okay, and users.js. Okay, so this user is whatever this is like exported as, and it's this like object right here. So it's a mongoose object. Okay, All right, so I guess Mongoose just gives us an object back, right? And we're able to Okay, so this is like a constructor that I pass in arguments to. So I think this is where I am defining the schema of this database. But here's the thing, like I know databases, they have, so like a SQL has the database and then it has tables inside the database. And each table has a different like schema and rules that it needs to follow. And then each table, how they interact with other tables, also has to have rules. So that's going to be our question. So I'm working with MongoDB inside of Node.js Express. I am able to. Okay, I want to know what the available schemas are and how I should set the actual database up. All right, so when working with MongoDB inside Node.js Express, you structure your database using Mongoose schema, which define how data is stored and organized. All right, so it's schema-less, meaning you can store flexible data, but with Mongoose, you define schemas for consistency. Here are some common data types. So we have the data types, which are here. That's fine. That's whatever. Okay, setting up your MongoDB database. We already set it up, so that's whatever. That's nothing. Alright. So connect to the database. So we import Mongoose. Yep, we import Mongoose. Mongoose.connect. Do we do a mongoose.connect? Let's look in server. So we don't even import it here. Is there like a search? No, okay. Process env mongo URI. What's this? I think that this is. I remember seeing something like this in my project here and realizing that this is like the name of the database. So process at Mongo URI is within here, Mongo URI. So this is like going to be the unique identifier to identify the MongoDB database. But what? Got it. Okay. Cool, so we found this, and now, so by the way, as you can tell, like what we're doing in this video is kind of just like spidering out, trying to figure out what's happening, how things are playing with each other. So let's now look at database.js. and then figure out how this is connected to the other objects or files within my project. So, all right. So what is this? So we also import Mongoose. So we import Mongoose in two places. Two different things, okay? And then we also want the environment variables, which this is like self. So Node.js is going to be running, okay? And this instance of Node.js has environment variables. And we can store some of those environment variables in this file right here. So this is like we're able to tell information about ourselves. And some of that information is very important because we can create like names for like here the database that we want to be communicating with. So we have, oh, where'd it go? We have here, we're doing this connect. Okay, so we're saying self.environmentVariables.mongo URI. So this is going to be that string. And then we want to do this. What is this? I have no idea. We're going to have to figure that out. And then we just say MongoDB connected, which is what we saw here when we first spun up our server. Okay, so where does this actually call this database.js? So I have this import statement, okay? Okay, where? I'm not seeing that it actually gets called. But we know that it gets called because I see that right there. I know that my what? Function inside is being called because I see on my terminal, but I don't see where in my server.js I actually call the db.js file or function. So this is probably a question like on how Node and JavaScript work. Maybe when you call this import, it auto does this connect? I'm not sure. I'm also not doing like an export. Why am I not doing an export? That doesn't make any sense. Right? Right? That's weird, isn't it? All the other ones have exports, like export. Does this one have export? Export. This is EJS, so it's not gonna have export. But all of the other, like, all of these, I had to do like export, 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 export. This one doesn't have an export. So great observation. The reason DB file is executed without explicitly calling a function in server.js is because of this line. Okay, so that's kind of what I was getting at is I'm guessing that when you do import, it auto like runs it. Okay. Here is my db.js file. And then why did I not need to export anything? Okay. Not that one. This one. Whoops. My order was a little bit wrong in that. The reason you didn't need to explicitly export anything in... Well, we still haven't figured this one out yet. We're all mixed up right now. I was just trying to line up my next question, but then it fired. Okay. Great question. The reason you didn't need to explicitly export anything in database.js file is because the file runs automatically on import. Fine, let's just go back up to here. Okay, so why does this work? This import statement runs the file when the server starts. Since database.js contains code that establishes a connection to MongoDB, it automatically executes upon import. You don't need to explicitly call a function. Just importing the file triggers its logic. So does that happen with every file that I do? Maybe it runs it, but then I don't see it being run because it passes back that object in the export. But if I'm not going to use that object, then I don't need to capture it and I don't need to export anything. I just needed to start the database. I don't know. Okay, so you don't need to explicitly call a function, just importing it triggers its logic. Okay, cool. So if you add a console log inside DB, you'll see it execute when server.js runs. So yeah, we saw that. So we knew that it was running. Okay, then restart your server and check the terminal. Okay, if you want more structured way to handle the database connection, modify DB to export a function. Here we go. See, requires a little bit more coffee. Take a 10-second break right here. Okay. So, exporting. Import mongoose from mongoose. Okay, cool. Const connect DB. So we're creating an object is equal to, and then we're getting back into the asynchronous stuff. So we're not looking at that right now. So this is what? An anonymous function, right? And we connect asynchronously here, okay? And then we export that. Okay. So then we only have that. Okay, so if we export it, it doesn't execute immediately. Okay, I need to kind of remember that. Like, if our database, or if our file is kind of captured in an object, it doesn't run it immediately. You need to explicitly call it. Okay, so we call it. Okay, this method makes it clear when the connection is being established. Your current setup is fine because importing runs a file. Okay, cool. So that kind of answers this. The reason you didn't need to explicitly export anything is because it runs automatically, is what the answer is. In your server.js, everything runs immediately. Okay. Doesn't it define reusable functions? Okay, whatever. Okay. So, there we go. We kind of understand this. Now we need to understand what this is doing. What is this doing? Alright, this code is establishing a connection between your Node.js application and MongoDB using Mongoose. Awesome. So, mongoose.connect, process environment variable Mongo URI. Okay, so this function connects to the MongoDB database. So process environment variable Mongo URI holds the MongoDB connection string, which usually stores the file for security. So the URI, first off, I'm kind of curious it's not URL, right? I know what a URL is, like in a browser, but this is URI. I've never heard. So what is URI, and is there any connection to a URL? Okay, I'm not going to press enter yet. We're just queuing up our questions. Okay, so the typical URI looks like this, which is similar to what we have, or for cloud databases. Okay, cloud databases. That sounds like another topic that we need to investigate in the future for this project. What is a cloud database, and how would my project change if I wanted to incorporate it into my project? Okay. So now use new URL parser ensures Mongoose uses the new MongoDB URL parser, preventing deprecation warnings. Okay, so this is just some setting within the MongoDB like library or something, whatever object we're doing, and we're setting it to true. This one is probably the exact same thing. Enables MongoDB unified topology layer, improving server discovery and monitoring. Okay, so it's just setting two settings. There's nothing interesting about that. So what happens is Mongoose reads the URI to know where the database is located. Mongoose establishes a connection with MongoDB. Your database is ready for queries, storing and retrieving data. Okay. So now, if the connection fails, Mongo will return an error. That's why it's a good idea to add error handling. Okay, cool. So let's put that there. And then once we figure this out, we can kind of go in and see how we input and grab data from the database. Okay, so what is a URI and how is it connected to a URL? URI is Uniform Resource Identifier. Okay, URL is Uniform Resource Locator. Okay, so URI, Uniform Resource Identifier, is a general term for identifying a resource on the internet. Resource, okay. URL is a type of URI that specifies how to access the resource, usually HTTP or HTTPS. Okay. So now think of it like this: URI, a unique way to identify something. Okay, URL, a URI that tells you where and how to access it. So this is where to access it. This is how to access it. All right, so every URL is a URI, but not all URIs are URLs. Your MongoDB connection string is a URI that tells MongoDB where to find the database, but I guess it doesn't tell it how. All right, so number 2, what is a cloud database and how would your project change? All right, a cloud database is hosted on remote servers. Yeah, that makes sense. Rather than on your local machine. Examples include MongoDB Atlas. Okay. AWS. Woo! RDS. Okay, so for relational databases, Google Firebase Firestone. Okay. If you want to use a cloud database for your project, sign up for them. Okay. Get your connection string. MongoDB Atlas will provide the URI. Okay, so they give you some kind of URI. So I go to Amazon's website. I sign up for their MongoDB Atlas. Okay, or no, not Atlas. Like RDS. Okay, and then they give me this right here, and they'll put in my information like username, password, whatever cluster it is. Okay, and then I go there and replace my local URI with the cloud-based connection string. So then Mongoose will no longer look to try to interact with my database, which is on my local hard drive, but actually go out to the internet, try to connect to Amazon. Amazon will say, hey, yes, I have access to that, or I do have this database. What's your password? Okay, so you have to identify that, yeah, you are this valid person, right? Username and then password. And then Amazon will say, yep, you got it. Here's your database. Okay, cool. All right, so modifying my database. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. All right. So, how can I add or what are the operations available to me? Now that I created my database with Node.js and Express, what are the operations available, whoops, to me. Well, that's thinking. I'm going to take another 10-second break. Alright. So, now that your MongoDB database is set up with Node.js and Express, you have access to several CRUD operations: create, read, update, delete. Yep. So, using Mongoose, here's a breakdown. So, we can create, so insert data. You can add documents to your MongoDB collection. So, this is definitely something that I want to know, like so number one, in MongoDB, there are collections. How do I identify a collection? So I know, like, for the SQL, you need to identify the table, and then you can access rows in that table, and each row will have certain, like, fields, like whatever, age, name, all that information. But seems like, okay, well, this is one not entity, but like row. And then I can create another row, but it's in the same collection. So I'm trying to wrap my head around how all this works. Okay. So you can add documents to your MongoDB collection. Const, new user. Okay, so this is what we had before. That's right here. Right here. No. Right there. Okay. So we're creating a new user and putting in this request.body. Okay. Which has username here and whatever I put in there, Timothy. Okay. And then we do await new user save. Okay. Or using express routes. Okay, so that's what we did. Retrieve data. You can fetch data from the database. So const users equals await user find. So we can still, is it the same object? Because if we run this file again, or function again, it is going to call and create a new object, right? Like, so how can I do find on an object that I've essentially lost once I hit this point right there? Okay. Let's keep looking at the 2. This user object that I create in the line will go out of scope once the function ends. Does this mean I lose access to it and can't see that entry anymore? Okay. Alright, so let's retrieve. So you can fetch data here. So const users equals await user find. Okay. So all users here, which actually I think I put this here. So this is why having a golden unit kind of is helpful, because we can know like, oh, okay, well, it's working. We know that it's working, so now we can kind of back engineer it to figure out how it's working, how we have access to it, and all of that. So if I believe it was working, I think that's what we were doing here, and we saw Timothy. So I think it was actually working. And is this the localhost user all users? Right? All users. Yeah, so it is working. So we know that it is working. I like that. Okay. So we can do this to get it. You can also find specific users. So is user itself a collection, or is user is user object itself a collection, and I can add multiple somethings inside of it, then I can have multiple other collections inside of my entire database. How can I connect collections together? Okay. So I can find one and say the data that I want. Okay. So I can do modify, which is, so we're always operating on this user here. Okay. So, but here it just looks like user just, or maybe it's because user here is this object that's like exported here, and when we grab it from here, we're kind of we're changing the object, right? But it's passed by reference, so we're just getting that actual object, right? So I'm able to go and change it over here from my file, which is what we're doing here. So we instantiate it. So we instantiate it and we create it, which means that it is actually created over here. And then I'm able to add data into it over here from here. Maybe that's what's going on. Delete data, so await user, delete one, and then we can delete things. Okay, so cool. Okay, so sorting and limiting results. Const user await user.find dot sort dot limit. So I think this means we're only going to get back 5 and sort by name maybe, and then so we find all, we sort, and then we limit it to 5. Okay. Count documents. So these are just kind of the operations that are available to me from that user object. So let's put that one in, and let's go to actually figure out what this user object is. Okay, so how do you identify a collection in MongoDB? A collection in MongoDB is like a table in SQL. Yeah, it holds multiple documents. Okay, so collection and document, these two things are different. Collection, document. Collection is a table. Collections hold documents. Okay. You can identify a collection in several ways. Database structure. Inside your database, collections are where your documents are stored. So, inside my database, collections are where documents are stored. Yep. Mongoose models. We need to find a mongoose model. So mongoose model user new schema. MongoDB automatically creates a collection named users. Okay? Mongoose pluralizes the model name. Yeah, we called it user here. And then we capture it here, user, user, user. No, it's not plural. Oh, whatever. Okay. I'm kind of stuck on that line right there because how does it pluralize it? Because sometimes you need es, or sometimes you just add s, or there's no simple rule. What if it's a made up word? How does it know to pluralize it? But okay, whatever. So from the command line, I can do show collections. But I need to be within the Mongo shell. Okay. This command lists all collections in the current database. MongoDB Compass, a GUI tool where you can see collections visually. Okay. Does new user go out of scope? Yes, new user is a local variable, and once the function ends, it goes out of scope. But the data is still saved in MongoDB because new user.save writes to the database. So this goes out of scope, but we save it in the database. Okay. The data is still saved. All right, so even though the user object disappears from your code, MongoDB keeps the document permanently. You can retrieve it later. User. So this is that object. So is user a collection? Not exactly. User is a mongoose model, which represents a MongoDB collection. So it is a collection. Where you define user, or when you define user, Mongoose automatically maps it to a collection called users. You can store multiple documents inside of user by creating user 1 and user 2 and then save, okay? You can create other collections with different models. Okay. Maybe we should do that. So again, this is kind of my method for learning this stuff, is get a working copy and then play with it. So understand what's going on and then start playing with it and start building on top of it. So maybe we'll have to create a new collection pretty soon. You can also create other collections with different models, okay? Const post equals mongoose model post schema. Okay. Const comment mongoose model. Okay. How can you connect collections together? You can connect collections together using object ID references. Okay. To create relationships. So, for example, if users have posts, you can store a reference to the user's ID inside of the post model. Const user schema equals new mongoose schema string name. So here's post schema. So it's just the fields within. Okay. And then we have type. So author is mongoose schema types object ID. So it's a mongoose ID type. So that's its type, like a string. This one is just an object ID. And then reference is user. Reference user collections. Okay. Now every post has an author linked to a user. Okay. So saving data with relations. Const new user, await user create here. New post, create title, first name. So author is new user.id. So I can access the ID value inside of this new user that I just created, right? This is a document, right? Because it's an object within the table. What do they call them? It holds multiple documents. Yeah. So it's an object it's a thing, because I don't want to use the word object. So it's a thing inside of a collection. Sure. And then I access the name or the ID, which is not the name. So ID is like the primary key of that document. this links the post to a user. Querying with population. To fetch posts with user details, use populate. Okay. Post.find. Okay. Users post comments. Okay, so I think now we have a little bit more understanding of how to actually go about creating tables, or not tables, collections, and adding documents within those collections and accessing those collections and getting documents from that. So I think I am going to leave the video off here, and then in the next video what we're going to do is try to create a new collection, okay? And then that new collection is going to have some connection to this user collection, and we're going to try to link them together, and I'm going to try to investigate more about this, like, find and how we can do the retrieves from the database, and then we'll just play around with it. So that's, I think, a pretty good way to learn, is just get in there and play around with it. So that's what we'll do in the next video. So if that is interesting, subscribe to this channel. Let's see, how many subscribers do I have now? Like, this is crazy. Look at that. 1,153. So thank you to everyone who subscribed. And I will see you in the next video. My name is Timothy Lee Grant, and goodbye.